Often people will say to me, did you just read my mind? When I'm training people, I make them look in the mirror.
Why do you do this?
Relationships are built with eye contact.
Really?
If you don't like yourself, how can you expect anybody else to like you? What's going on in here reflects out here, and we can't stop it.
Are there any signs that somebody is internally having a hard time?
You know, people talk about emotional intelligence all the time, but if you don't know what emotions look like on the face and in the body language, you're not truly emotionally intelligent. We trust people more when we see their hands.
Okay, I love that. I didn't know that's a great tip.
When you've got a tough message to deliver or there's any tension going on, sitting opposite is a very confrontational way to be.
Can you improve your relationship by just improving your eye contact?
There's a couple of things here.
Hi and welcome to Rise with Roxie. Wherever you're joining us from today, I hope you're ready to uncover a secret superpower that could transform the way you communicate and the way that you feel. Today, we're talking about body language, the silent signals that shape how the world sees us, how we see others, and how we see ourselves. I'm so excited to be joined by author and body language expert Adrienne Carter. Known as the Face Whisperer, she's helped countless people decode the mysteries of non-verbal communication through her best-selling books and expertise. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to hit the follow button. Adrienne, thank you so much for joining. I've been so excited to have you on. And what a title, The Face Whisperer. That is so strong. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So we hear lots of different stats about how important non-verbal cues are. And I guess my first question is really to understand how much are we really giving away without the things that we say?
We give away quite a lot, actually, from our body language and our facial expressions. So if someone's really conscious of their body language, say from here downwards, they might not give as much away. But what they will be doing is giving away stuff with their face. And if they're really conscious of their facial expressions, then they'll probably leak information through their body language, because it's really hard, actually, to control everything. So the top poker players in the world, they are the best at hiding how they really feel, but most of us aren't top poker players.
So, you know, when we think about, let's say, first impressions, so, you know, we're meeting people all the time, whether it's when we're going on a date, when we're going into an interview, meeting our in-laws for the first time, you know, first impressions really matter. Yeah. And how much of first impressions is about body language, the way that we hold ourselves?
The scientists say that we judge someone within like half a second. Like we've made our decision whether we like them, whether we trust them, you know, whether we want to get to know them more. So we are making these super quick judgments, but we've got to remember that our first impressions are also, people perceive us in a way that's from their world, if that makes sense. So their biases and how they view us, they have their own biases. So as much as we can control some things about our first impressions, there's lots we can't too.
So what can we control?
How we turn up, you know, how I dressed today was important to me. How you've dressed today is important to you. How I've done my hair, you know, whether I wear my glasses or don't wear my glasses. There's lots of things we can control. And it's one of the things I talk about a lot is how intentional are we with our body language? Because if we just turn up and we don't give any thought to how we're turning up, we can be sending completely the wrong message.
So let's start with confidence, because I think, you know, most of us, we know that confidence is like a very attractive trait. I think it's something that helps other people trust you, feel more open to you. So how can somebody go into a situation and portray confidence?
I mean, confidence, I actually think, is one of the most important ways to show up. Because if we're nervous when we turn up, and it can be any situation, it can be work, can be personal, can be a date, can be anything. If we turn up and we're really nervous, what does that say about us? That do we really want to be there? You know, do we really like the other person? Why are we uncertain? You know, if I turned up on this podcast and I'm really nervous, do I actually even belong here? So confidence is about showing up and belonging, I think, and having the courage to be confident and own your own space. That's really important.
Okay, so we know the importance of going into a situation feeling confident. So what are some of the tips that you have for how people can do that? So let's start with the way that they walk into a room.
Slow it down. Slow your steps down, because what that will do is give you a chance to breathe. And the slower we walk, the more confident we look. If we scurry in somewhere, it looks a bit frantic and it looks nervous or high energy that might not be appropriate. So slow walk.
Okay, so walking in, we're slow. Then how are we sitting down?
I always sit, and I've sat with my hands sort of together or loosely clasped on my lap if I'm sitting down, or if I'm at a table, then maybe on the table. We trust people more when we see their hands. So if possible, I always keep my hands visible. But, you know, if you just sat like this, it's a really nice way to just sit, to hold them loosely, because it gives your hands something to do. Because if you are feeling a bit nervous, you know, you might start fidgeting or, you know, doing something with your hands. Where if you just sit, hold them loosely, it comes across more confident.
Okay, I love that. I love that. I didn't know that if people can see your hands, they trust you more.
Yeah.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know how to sit, we know how to walk in. Now, how about the way that we speak, our voice, our tone of voice, speed of voice?
Yeah. If you are naturally high pitched and you want to be perceived as more confident, I would just lower it slightly and slow down your pitch as well. Because if we talk really fast, which I do have a tendency to do, particularly about my topic, because I love it and I'm passionate about it. But if I had just consciously slow myself down a bit and allow those pauses, allow people to process, we come across as more confident too.
When it comes to public speaking and performing, I always think that I'm too expressive with my hands and that I use my hands too much. Is there a limit?
It's where you use your hands rather than how much you use your hands.
Right.
So I always say from shoulder to there, there's like a box that you stay within that box. If you go too high, it's a bit jazz hands. If you go too low, it's a bit weird.
Right.
So keep within that box.
Right.
But you can't gesture too much. If they're natural,
Really?
no.
So performing on stage is fine?
Yeah, because
using your hands?
does it come naturally to you? Or,
Yeah, it's just that I watch back and I cringe and I'm like, oh my God, stop moving your hands so much.
No, I gesture a lot too, as you can see. I'm
fine.
trying to keep my hands still, but I'm not. I gesture all the time too.
Okay, fine. That's great
I
to
just
know.
keep it within that area.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it can be too much. So keep it within that area and it's fine.
Amazing. Let's say that we're going on a date. Okay, how can we appear more confident on a date?
I always say feet flat on the floor. So
Oh, really? So not crossed?
You can do crossed if you feel really confident. You can cross your legs. If you don't, you might want to put your feet firmly on the floor because it gives you a really stable foundation, and that's whether you're stood or whether you're sitting.
Right.
So a bar stool's not ideal for that, but you can feel a little bit uncertain. You know, some of those bar stools where you have to climb up and sit on them. You feel a bit, I always feel a bit shaken, like I haven't got a firm foundation. So a firm foundation works really well on a date. And you know what? I always say, if you're nervous and it's appropriate to say it, you know, I'm really nervous about this. I'm excited, but I'm really nervous, because that way you'll relax and the other person will relax too.
Okay, so we know that there are certain things we can do to help us to appear more confident.
Yeah.
Is there anything that might be happening? You know, let's say that is our intention. What about the unconscious signals that are implying that we aren't confident, and how can we become more aware of them so we can avoid them?
So the unconscious signals, people often go to their neck. You know, when they're feeling uncertain or nervous about something, they'll start doing this. So keep your hands away from your neck and your face, because again, we'll touch our faces when we're nervous. So sitting with your hands, giving them something to do, or holding a pen, taking notes, not on a date. Don't take notes on a date, it's not good. But doing something with our hands if we are nervous is really important, actually.
Do you know, it's really funny you say this, because I actually put in one of my notes that I was going to ask you. I have a theory. Whenever I'm in a taxi and I see a driver touch his neck like this or scratch his neck, I always think that probably means he's taken a wrong turn or he's missed something, or something's just not gone right. Is this theory right?
I think you're properly spot on, yeah. When we're nervous about things, the instinct is to do this. You know, you might see someone, if they're wearing a tie, you might start seeing them doing that.
Why?
Because here there's a point, and I can never say the word. It's a sternum. That's not the right pronunciation. Notch. But if we are feeling nervous, we go for that, because if you rub that for more than 30 seconds, your nervous system starts to calm down.
My gosh, so your body has this like instinctive knowing that this is an area that will calm you down.
Yes.
That's so clever.
And if, you know, do you see people doing this when they put their hands to their forehead? Again, those 2 points there are the body's natural way of calming us down.
Here.
Yeah, so these 2 points here. If you rub those for more than 30 seconds, it will calm your nervous system down.
Oh my God, there's so many great tips for people already. I'm so excited. I've just written a book on confidence called 8 Steps to Knowing Your Worth. And in it, I speak a little bit about body language and about how you can show up as your future self, your most confident self. We've kind of touched on the fact that, you know, when you walk into a room, if you want to appear more confident, there are things that you can do so that other people view you as more confident. What I really am interested in is the fact that if we act confident by changing our body language, we don't just appear more confident, we actually feel more confident. So we can change the way that we feel about ourselves based on what we're doing. Can you please explain that to everybody listening?
Well, the mind-body link is so intrinsically, you know, inseparable. Because what goes on in here will manifest. So I can never read somebody's mind, but I know how they might be feeling with their facial expressions and their body language, because it will tell me what's going on for them. And I understand how emotions work and how they display themselves. So often people will say to me, did you just read my mind? I'm like, I didn't read your mind. I cannot say a word of what's going on in there. But how you reflect what's going on in there through your body language gives me a really good clue as to how you might be feeling, because it's not separable.
Can you give us some examples of something you might read in someone and how that what you might be able to like find out about the way they're feeling?
Yeah, so the facial expressions is a big part of my word, hence the face whisperer. I don't do facials, but it is about understanding how other people really feel. So, you know, if I see this, that's a half smile. So the half smile is the lip corners and tightened on one side of the face only. So it's that, which I can do. Not so easy to do when it's not come naturally, but I do it when it is natural. But it's the lips cornered and tightened on one side of the face only. And on the other side of the face, there's nothing going on emotionally, and muscle-wise, nothing happens. I know that person is feeling superior in that moment.
Really?
And if we're talking about something, maybe, you know, some of the work I do with my clients, if they're interviewing for a job interview and the person who's being interviewed does high levels of this throughout the interview, they either think they're more superior to the role or they're better than the person that perhaps is interviewing them. Either way, they're going to be a nightmare to manage. Same on a date, you know, unless you're like a bad boy or a bad girl, you might want to steer clear of that half smile, because I call it the superior smirk, because the person is feeling superior in some way. So once you understand expressions and body language and the emotional meaning, you can pretty well tell what's going on for people and how they might be feeling in that moment. And our context is super important. You know, we've always got to remember that, you know, if I've just won an award and I'm showing that half smile of superiority, well, I probably deserve it because I just won an award. So you've got to remember the context is king. But what's going on in here reflects out here, and we can't stop it. You know, these emotions are innate within us. We have mannerisms that we learn and habits that we form, but a lot of our spontaneous movements and gestures give us a clue to what's going on.
Before we kind of carry on with the conversation around, you know, how we can actually fake how we feel about ourselves or help ourselves to feel more confident, I want to actually go a bit more into what you've just been talking about, which is being able to read people's expressions and and see them as kind of like little warnings. So first, before I ask, I used to be obsessed with this program called Lie to Me.
Oh, yes.
Did you ever watch it?
I trained with the scientific director of Lie to Me.
You're kidding?
No.
That's amazing. Okay, so for anyone who hasn't watched it, it's this kind of facial, he can kind of read micro expressions in this really incredible way, and he uses it to help solve crimes. How true is it? Like, can you really read micro expressions and be able to determine when somebody's lying? And if so, can you tell us some of those?
Okay. So micro expressions happen in the blink of an eye. Really hard to capture in real life. Macro expressions, which are the ones that we all see that we often don't pay attention to but are there for information, we can all see that with a bit of fine-tuning. Some people are naturally good at it. Some people can be trained to be good at it. As for the programme Lie to Me, it was a dramatisation. And if you notice, on every time he was interviewing someone, there was a camera there and he filmed them. Because micro-expressions, you have to capture them. When I watch for micro-expressions, I watch the footage in 15 frames per second.
Right.
to capture the micro expressions. So that's not easy to do in real time. But the macro expressions that can last up to 2 seconds, we can all do that.
So what are some macro expressions that maybe highlight deceit or lying or something like that?
There is no one sign of lying. However, when people do this, the nose wrinkling, so that, and they do it normally quick. I've done that quite prolonged there so everyone can see it.
Yeah.
But that quick flick means they don't like something. And it could be something they've just heard or said. And it's a sign sometimes that they don't believe what they've just said, or they don't believe what they've just heard. So it's not a sign of lying per se, but it is always a good cue. Like if a salesman says to me, oh, this is really great, this is going to change your life, I'm thinking, I'm out, because he doesn't believe in the product. I'm not going to believe in the product either.
That is brilliant. So let's take it back to, this ability to change the way that we feel. So you said that obviously there's a real mind-body connection, and you can tell how we're feeling based on the signals that we're putting out.
Yes.
But what about doing it the other way around? What about changing the signals we're putting out to change the way that we feel? So reversing that kind of mind-body loop.
Absolutely. And that's where we become intentional about our body language. If you notice you suddenly start fidgeting, change it. Becoming hyper aware of ourselves is a really key step to becoming more confident. I always say to my clients, film yourself. What are your behaviours that you do all of the time that could be giving away not what you want to give away? Ask your colleagues, ask your family members, what do I do all the time when I'm talking? Am I fiddling? Am I touching my neck? Am I touching my face? Am I messing with my hair? What are the things that we do all of the time? Because once we become aware of them, then we can change them. If we're not aware of them, we can't change them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I noticed recently, I do a lot of motivational speaking. And recently I was going on stage to give one of my shows, and I was wearing this jumpsuit that if I raised my arms too high, it would basically give me underboob. And I didn't want that to happen. So I realized that throughout the show my body language was extremely restricted. I couldn't kind of like go on stage and do my wave. I couldn't express myself like this. I was really had to stay like this for much of the show. And even though it's a show that I've given countless times, I feel really confident in it, on this occasion I felt so dejected. I didn't feel like it went well. I just didn't feel in my power. And how much of that is because the way that I was physically behaving was changing the way that I felt about the performance.
100%. No doubt in my mind. I do a lot of presenting on stage too, and I will always road test a new outfit. I will not get on stage with a new outfit before I've road tested it.
Right.
Because as you just said, if you feel uncomfortable and can't fully express yourself, you don't feel like you've done a good job, and you don't feel like you've given your best to the audience. So it's really important that what you wear is comfortable, and you want to feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable, it will show, and the audience won't know why you feel uncomfortable, because you're not going to say, well, actually I don't want to show you my underboob. So they won't know why you're uncomfortable. So then they get a mixed message.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure you have met and come across many, many successful people in your time. Are there any sort of common characteristics that they all share?
It's that confidence and that authenticity, actually. Those are the two. What's the word? I want to say values, but they're not values. They're skills, I think. Once people master confidence, it makes it very easy for other people to be confident in them. And the authenticity, you just said about being who you truly are is so important, but in a way that doesn't shut people out. It's all right standing firm to a principle, I will show up as I want to. But we want to engage with people. And for me, body language is all about how do we communicate better? So that's being aware of what the signals we send out too.
I think eye contact is a really interesting thing, because it's something that people can really struggle with. And there's something really, one of those bonding exercises, or I've been to many retreats, and part of that the exercises they do is like maintain eye contact with someone, and it's really quite hard.
It is.
And sometimes if somebody gives you too much eye contact, I know that I can certainly feel like, oh my God, please stop looking at me. What's the line with eye contact? 60
to 70% of the time in a normal interaction. If you're in a personal relationship with someone, then it's fine to be a whole lot more eye contact. And in fact, it should be encouraged because relationships are built with eye contact.
Really?
So there's an experiment a few years ago now. I can't remember exactly when it was, but they got strangers to fall in love with somebody else by them just doing eye contact.
No.
And I think it was something like for 4 minutes, getting them to stare at each other. And it just builds up so much likability, trust, that eye contact. And when I'm training people, I make them look in the mirror. The amount of people that don't like looking at themselves in a mirror is quite scary. So we'll start with some people 5 seconds.
Why do you do this?
Because you've got to like yourself. If you don't like yourself, how can you expect anybody else to like you?
Wow. So really just by asking someone and encouraging them to look at themselves in the mirror.
5 seconds a day for a week, and then we'll build it up to 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and get really comfortable looking at yourself.
Wow.
Because if you won't look at yourself, you're not going to look at anybody else.
Yeah.
And if we don't look at people and give them that 60 to 70% eye contact, they think we're shifty. They think we're trying to hide something.
Right.
So getting comfortable with eye contact is another sign of confidence.
That's a really interesting little technique for building that confidence and self-love, actually, that I've never heard of before.
Totally, yeah.
Because obviously I love the idea of things like repeating positive affirmations, and a lot of people think that affirmations just have to be done in the mirror, and that feels too much. But actually, we can separate them. Say your affirmations to yourself whenever, but try just looking at yourself in the mirror just to actually get comfortable with yourself and build that self-trust and self-love.
And being comfortable with yourself, there's not a lot we can do to change who we are. And when you look in your own eyes, you get to see who you really are. And not to look with judgment, to look at yourself and go, actually, my eyes are really nice.
Yeah.
Oh, my eyebrows look good today.
Yeah.
Oh, my lipstick's looking great. And start saying positive things to yourself, because the scientists say that our thoughts are often 75% negatively biased. So if we're saying negativity to ourselves all the time, how does that affect us? So I'm a big believer in the positive.
Can you improve your relationship by just improving your eye contact? So let's say somebody's already in a long-term relationship. They feel like maybe they're feeling disconnected to their partner. Do you think that by just paying attention to increasing the amount of eye contact, you can actually improve the relationship?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a couple of things here. When you go out for dinner with your partner, and you sit opposite, if there's any tension going on, that will often result in an argument. So if there's any tension going on, maybe sit at an angle, but make sure you have that eye contact, because, we trust people more when we see their eyes. And if we're not looking at each other, we're losing that connection. It's such an important part of relationships. But if there is any tension, don't maybe sit directly opposite.
Why?
Because it can often just lead to an argument. If me and my husband go out for dinner and there's something either I'm irritated or he's irritated about, I make him sit at the side of me. Because otherwise it's going to end up in...
Is it physically you feel like head on head?
It's confrontational.
Right.
It's confrontational. So sit on an angle or next to each other. We're not confrontational because we're having a nice chat, but if your chair came to the side there or mine came to the side there, that would be less confrontational. When you've got a tough message to deliver or there's any tension going on, sitting opposite is a very confrontational way to be. We're having a chat, so there's no tension, so it's fine. But if there is anything, I would go side to side or on an angle.
That's a great tip.
But still make eye contact.
Yeah. What about going for let's say you need to have a hard conversation with someone, maybe it's a friend or, a family member. What do you think about people going for a walk to talk it out?
Really good idea. But I would still be really conscious of creating the eye contact.
Right.
So looking at the person. So don't go for a drive in the car because you can't look at the person. But a walk is a good idea as long as you're conscious of still actually making sure you make eye contact.
Great.
That's the important part.
There are so many tips. I'm like, oh my God, you're just a ball of knowledge. If somebody is having a really bad day or a bad time, maybe they're stuck in their rut, how can you use body language to help you to reset?
Yeah. Change your energy. So go for a walk, go for a run, go to the forest, go and walk the dog, move the energy around, because you can't be sat on the sofa and you're already feeling down, you're already feeling miserable. Your body language will show that. You'll slump, everything will become lower. Whereas if you change that physiology and change the energy, everything moves. And just, even just holding yourself, bit more upright. Some say about putting the pencil on your lips. Have you heard of that one?
No.
To make yourself smile.
No. You know, my dad used to always tell me, he would say, you know, if I would ever like having a bad day, Rowan, that's my real name, he'd say, Rowan, just smile.
Yeah.
Just smile and you'll feel better.
Yeah.
Was he right?
Yeah, he was totally right. Totally right. And it's hard to do sometimes. If you're really having a really bad day, the last thing you feel like doing is smiling.
Yeah, it can feel such an effort.
Yeah. But actually, it's one of the best things you can do for yourself.
So what do? You put a pencil?
You put a pencil in your mouth.
Yeah.
So there, and then it kind of does that.
Oh.
And it holds a smile there. So if you can't do it for yourself,
Yeah.
put a pen or a pencil in your mouth and just hold it there for a minute or two, and it will get easier.
That's true. And there is a lot of research, isn't there, on the fact that smiling really can kind of produce those happy hormones and
Totally,
make you feel better.
Yeah. So I take on some one-to-one clients, not loads now, but I help people feel better about themselves. And there's a few processes that I do. One of the things is, as we've already talked about, is getting really comfortable with looking at yourself in the mirror and actually focusing on what you're good at. So I worked with this one chap and he had a cleaning job. Clever man. When he used to show the things that he'd created or tell me about his creations, I'm like, why don't you do this for a job? I'm like, oh no, I can't do that. I'm cleaning. You know, he's a very good cleaner and he enjoyed it. But you're wasted. You've got so much talent. And actually, just by focusing on what he was good at and giving him some confidence, like saying, tell me more about that. You know, when we feel listened to as humans, we blossom. So giving him attention, giving him the space to say how he really feels, non-judgmental space. And the biggest practice was him looking in the mirror. And he got to a point, I met him about 6 months ago again, we just had a coffee, and he said, you know what, I still look at myself in the mirror, I can now do a minute and a half. Oh. And he started at 5 seconds a day, and he stayed at 5 seconds for a long time, because he just couldn't look at himself, because he hated himself that much. But his confidence grew and he grew. He's now started his own business. He's making ruckloads of money. He's teaching at a university, and he's doing lots of great things, all because he was open-minded enough to listen to some techniques that would help him, and he went and put them into practice.
That is so beautiful. Yeah,
it's a lovely story, but there's lots of people, you know, starting with that foundation of just getting to like yourself. Liking yourself, for me, is super important.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realise how important that is. And I don't think we always realise how much most people hate themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is a lack of confidence, and this is why I wrote this next book.
It's a pandemic.
It is, and it's the thing that honestly it kind of connects us all in a way. It's the sad truth that we all share this lack of confidence and this, and like I always say in my workshops that there are thousands of people in the room, and I always say, who here can say that they are completely free of self-doubt? And not a single person will raise their hand. You know, thousands and thousands of people I've asked that to. Yeah. No one will raise their hand, you know, and I think actually so much of this work is about a journey back to ourselves. And what I really love about this conversation that we're having is that there's so many practical ways that we can build confidence. One thing I think people really struggle with is walking into events or parties on their own. Yeah. And people feel really nervous. And I think as soon as people feel nervous in social situations like that, they physically shrink themselves. Yeah. How can somebody feel better about going into a situation on their own?
I always say to people, pretend you're looking for someone. Don't be tempted to look at your phone. Don't be tempted to put your hands in your pocket and hide. Walk in and pretend to be looking for someone, because people will assume you are looking for someone, and someone might come across and say, oh, well, can I help you? And then you're into a conversation then. Or go head for somewhere. Think, right, okay, I know roughly the layout of this room. There's going to be a bar at the end, or there's going to be a tea and coffee. Walk to that without looking at your phone and look for something. Or you could just say to someone, do you know where the toilets are? Do you know where the coffee is? And that way you will feel more confident. Whereas if you go in and shrink, oh, not supposed to be here, straight away you will feel worse.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so easy to just think before you walk into a situation where you're nervous, how steady am I going to walk into the room? Yeah. How slow am I going to speak? Yeah. You know, and so I love this. I love giving people actionable, practical, easy tools to use. Do you think that people underestimate the power of body language when it comes to confidence, and why do you think that is?
I think people see it as a soft skill. It's actually a vital skill. It's how we communicate. Even people that are born blind communicate with their body language and their facial expressions. So, on our day-to-day lives, when we can't see someone, so one of the things I do when I'm training people is I get them to sit back to back and try and have a conversation. And they realise how difficult that is because we're all taking in information from our body language all of the time, and how we're reading other people, how they're reading us, how I show up affects how you then show up towards me. So we've got this happening all the time, and actually it's a crucial skill. If you want to get on in the world and you want to build great relationships, whether that's personally in your family or at work, becoming aware of body language and what other people are revealing. And people talk about emotional intelligence all the time. Great, but if you don't know what emotions look like on the face and in the body language, you're not truly emotionally intelligent. So it's a real skill, and a vital skill if you want to get on.
What is something that somebody can do who, let's say, they really want to feel that way, they really want to feel more positive, but a lot of people are suffering from anxiety. More and more people are feeling anxious, they're feeling overwhelmed, they're feeling stressed. What are some things they can do to change the way they're holding themselves that can instantly ease that anxiety, ease that overwhelm, and help them step into the day as a kind of more confident version of themselves?
Yeah. I think the anxiety thing is an interesting one. Anxiety is all about feeling out of control, uncertain. So look for ways to bring some certainty into your life. That doesn't mean becoming a control freak. It doesn't mean controlling everything to the nth degree, because that's not useful either. But actually looking for ways, like I'm going to put a really comfy warm jumper on today because I feel cold and I feel uncertain. So let's wear something that's snuggly. Turn the heating up slightly. Just slightly, because that's an expensive thing to do now as well. But looking for ways to comfort yourself. So I'm not talking about overeating or over drinking or anything like that, but ways that you enjoy doing something to just lessen that anxiety and to give a bit of control back to yourself.
Can you physically comfort yourself?
Yes, you can. When we soothe ourselves, so we rub our arms, one hand on the opposite arm, and we rub up and down, and that's self-soothing.
Like hugging ourselves.
Yeah, and you will start to feel physically comforted.
Can I ask then, if we think about like emotional intelligence and being able to read people, one thing I think which would be really important would be understanding when perhaps somebody is in need or when somebody's struggling. Because I think that so often today we hear about people who've been suffering silently, people who are really having a hard time, but on the outside they appear to be really happy. Are there any signs that somebody is internally having a hard time?
I've done a lot of work with Samaritans in the past. I was a volunteer for many years, and there are signs when people are really feeling hopeless that we can look for. So one of the signs that people do when they're feeling really low is I call that the sigh of hopelessness. Everything slumps, the shoulders slump. They do that lots. The signs of sadness in the forehead, the muscles here contract and they become deepened and furrowed across ways. So they might be laughing, but we are so clever as humans that we can show more than one emotion at a time. So the outward display is a social smile or a laugh. But actually these other signs are really visible if you know what to look for. And I do a lot on mental health, being able to spot the signs of mental health, because without this we have no health, do we?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's so helpful for people to know that, just so that we can just look out for each other a little bit more.
Totally.
So I want to talk to you now about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which I also studied in years ago. Not everyone knows what it is. No. So would you be able to explain for us?
In a simple term, I say it's a communication tool. It's to help people communicate better, both from their own perspective and reading other people too. One of the key concepts of NLP is about the map is not the territory, and our perception, how we perceive things isn't going to be how other people perceive things. For me, that was one of the most important learnings. Like, I thought everybody hated the rain. Actually, some people love the rain. And it's getting alongside people and understanding the world from their shoes rather from our shoes, which creates great communications.
I heard a great tip when I was studying that was about understanding the way in which people communicate. So some people will always use words like, I feel.
Yes.
Some will say, I hear you.
Yeah.
Some will say, I see. So they talk in different kind of, well, actually, I'm going to mess this up. So can you explain? I think you know what I mean. Can you explain this?
Yeah. So some people, if you want to find out how they're processing information, you can say to them, so where did you go on holiday and what sort of things did you do on holiday? And if they start describing the visual scene, then they've processed that information visually. If they start telling you how they feel about the holiday and I love doing this and I love doing that and the feel of the sand on my toes, then they're processing as what they call a kinesthetic learner, so via their emotions. Or actually, I heard the waves crashing. If they're talking about words with hearing sentences, I heard this, I heard that, then they're processing that way. And ideally, to be great communicators, we want to be chucking in each of those processing ways so that our listeners find something that's useful to them. Not so easy to do. Right. I often find myself, I say things like, does that make sense? So I'm very much logical. And I go like, do you understand? Or does that make sense? But I have to remember, actually, other people will be visual learners. So saying things like, do you see what I mean? Do you see that? Can you picture that? So that we're trying to capture everybody's way of processing information.
If somebody is listening and they want to perhaps reprogram their mind, they want to think differently, they want to bring in more positive behaviours into their lives, how do you think they could use NLP to help them do that?
One of the other concepts of NLP is about you get what you focus on. So becoming aware of what you're focusing on. Are you focusing on stuff that you don't want? Or are you focusing on stuff that you do want? The example I always use, when my kids were younger, you say, what do you want for dinner tonight? And they were like, I don't want Chinese, I don't want Indian, I don't want spaghetti bolognese. That wasn't the question I asked you. I asked you what you want. And I use that in day-to-day life too. What do you want? Because the more clear you are on what you want, the more chance you've got of getting it. And I always get people, when I'm training them, go and find a purple car. Focus on a purple car, because how often do we see purple cars? Not very often, because they're not that predominant, are they anymore? It's not trendy. I literally see a purple car every day. Every day I leave the house, I see a purple car, because my brain is focused to find purple cars. And
this is called frequency illusion, isn't it?
Yeah,
where our minds are biased. One of the cognitive biases that our minds use is to pay attention to things that we are focusing on. And I think this is so closely linked to manifestation, actually. I talk a lot about manifesting and, I tell people the same thing. Don't keep focusing on where you're lacking, because it will keep you stuck in a place of lack and scarcity. We should be focusing on the things that we have, on abundance and creating that abundant mindset. I mean, how aware are you of manifesting, and how closely linked do you think that is to NLP?
Oh, totally. And I had already read your book before we met.
Really?
Yes. I hadn't read it. I heard it on Audible. I listened to it in the car. So I had read it. I've got an interesting story. When I got the message from the team to come do this podcast, you asked me for the October the 7th, which I couldn't do because I was already, and I thought, could I move that meeting? I probably could, but it doesn't feel right to move it. So my favourite numbers, as everyone who knows me knows, is 1111. I live at number 11, and if I see 1111 on my phone or on a clock or somewhere, I always text my friends like 1111, because I love those numbers. And then so I went back to the team and said, sorry, I can't do the 7th. I've already got a meeting booked. And the team came back with, could you do the 11th of November at 11 o'clock? And I said, yes, I can. Yes, I can.
I love that. That is brilliant.
And I totally believe in manifestation. And, as you wrote in your book, it's not about inaction and just waiting for things to happen. It's about taking action as well. But one of the actions I take is I notice 11:11, because it means for me all is well and things are on track.
Yeah, it's a sign.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point. Let's quickly just pick up on that, because I think people love to look for signs, and I think that people often ask me, I keep seeing 22, or you see repeated numbers often, or angel numbers as people call them, but I think it doesn't really always matter necessarily what they mean. It's what you make of them.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's that self-talk again, NLP, back to that communication. We're talking to ourselves all the time. And, if you tell yourself to look for the good things, you're going to find them, because that's what you're telling yourself to do. However, if you tell yourself to look for the negativity, you'll also find that too. If you go, I'm really nervous and I'm going to fluff this meeting today, have a guess what? You probably will fluff it, because that's the instruction you gave to your brain.
Absolutely.
So NLP, back to that again, is all about the instructions we give to ourselves and to other people affects their behaviour.
So what could be a great kind of thing that somebody could say to themselves at the start of every day to help instruct their brain to have a good day or to see good things?
I focus on every day, like, what's my day? Before I get out of bed in the morning, if I've got time, before I get out of bed, I sort of visually run through my day, and I think, that's going to go really well. This podcast is going to go really well today. I'm going to really like doing this today. Trains are all going to run on time. I'm going to have a lovely lunch afterwards with my friend, and I run through that sort of thing and visualise how I want it to be, because I could easily focus on the train's going to be late, it's going to rain, my hair's going to be a mess. But how does that benefit me? I'm much more likely to get the things I want happening if I focus on them. And then if the worst does happen and the rain falls and my hair goes frizzy, so what?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And it really is so closely linked to manifesting, isn't it? Can I ask, what have you read from me this conversation?
I get that you are naturally confident. I don't know if you feel that inside, but you are confident, particularly in this setting. You come across as confident and you're enjoying yourself, which is super important.
I think actually this is a situation where I have felt really nervous the first few sessions, doing a new podcast, starting something new, interviewing people is something that I'd not done before. I really felt like I was nervous the first few episodes. But for me, confidence isn't avoiding things that make you nervous. It's about understanding that, yes, you're a beginner, but you're going to do it anyway. And actually for me, just sitting here and feeling comfortable in my own skin, that is enough. And it doesn't matter if it's not a perfect interview or I don't say things perfectly. You can still have a positive experience even if you're feeling nervous about something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think perfection is overrated, People are striving for perfection, but actually we warm to people who are who they really are, and they're vulnerable. I'll fluff my words, my hair will get on my nerves like it is today getting in my eyes. It doesn't matter. The more real we are, the more people will connect to us.
Oh my gosh, I just feel so privileged to have sat down with you. You are so knowledgeable about so many things, and I think that you share actually a very similar mindset to me around self-belief and self-worth, and hearing you kind of convey that message in a different way I think is so helpful, and I think is going to really be empowering for a lot of people listening.
I hope
so thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thanks to Adrienne for joining us on Rise with Roxie. Her book, The Face Whisperer, is out now, or you can head to adriennecarter.com to check out more of her work. My new book, Confidence, 8 Steps to Knowing Your Worth, is available now on pre-order. You can get yours from Amazon or any major bookshop. It will be released on March the 27th, and I cannot wait for you all to read it. Please don't forget to also follow Rise with Roxie and check out our social channels, Rise with Roxie, on Instagram and TikTok.